Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome along to the deep dive.
It's great to be diving in again.
Yeah, absolutely. Our mission today, as always, is to really cut through that noise, that sheer volume of information hitting us from all sides. We've got a huge stack of global sources here.
A really diverse stack this time. We're going from fundamental physics all the way through to market tremors and some really complex geopolitical plays.
Exactly. We're trying to pull out the critical knowledge, the stuff you really need to understand. What's shifting globally? Science, space, technology, geopolitics, finance. It's all in the mix.
And today we're seeing some quite extreme ends of the spectrum. We've got reports on breakthroughs that genuinely seem to challenge the laws of physics as we understood them.
Which is mind-bending stuff to start with.
Right. And then almost in the same breath, we're looking at detailed reports on the very real, very human stakes in conflicts like Ukraine and Gaza, plus economic fallout from AI adoption and market volatility.
So it's a rapid deep dive, but a comprehensive one. We're going to start right there. With science rewriting its own rules, this idea that maybe the impossible isn't quite so impossible anymore.
A bold claim.
Definitely. And then we'll pivot straight into how those kinds of tech shifts, like AI, are already reshaping jobs, reshaping trade agreements that have stood for decades.
And then, the really critical diplomatic efforts underway right now, particularly concerning Gaza and the ongoing situation in Ukraine. It's a lot to cover.
It is. The pace of change feels, dizzying sometimes. So let's get straight into it. Prepare to have some assumptions challenged, I think. We're starting with segment 1. Challenging the fundamentals, looking at the absolute cutting edge of science and space.
Okay, let's do it.
Right, physics first. Because this could be one of the biggest challenges to established science we've seen in a very long time. We're talking about Werner Heisenberg's uncertainty principle from 1927.
The bedrock. I mean, for nearly 100 years, that principle has been absolutely fundamental to quantum mechanics.
Explain it simply again, the basic idea.
The core idea is this inescapable trade-off. If you want to measure exactly where a tiny particle is, its position, you inevitably disturb its momentum, making that uncertain. And vice versa, measure the momentum precisely, and you lose certainty about its position.
And crucially, this wasn't seen as just a limitation of our measuring tools, right?
No, exactly. That's the key. Heisenberg's principle stated this is an intrinsic property of nature itself. The very act of observing, of measuring, inherently disturbs the quantum system. You can't help but affect it. Like shining a photon to see an electron changes the electron's momentum.
It's like the universe has this built-in rule. Sorry, you can't know everything perfectly at the same time.
It's a good way to put it.
But now, now there's this new research, a study that's making waves because it claims they've found a way around this fundamental limit.
Yeah, the claim is they can now measure both the position and the momentum of a particle simultaneously. And precisely.
Which sounds impossible based on what we just said.
Well, the scientific community is understandably scrutinizing this very, very carefully. If it's confirmed, it's genuinely a paradigm shift. The thinking behind the new approach seems to involve things like conditional preparation or maybe weak measurement techniques.
Okay, what does that mean in practice? Weak measurement.
It's complex, but the gist is finding ways to gain information about the system with a much, much smaller disturbance than traditional measurement. Maybe extracting tiny bits of information over time, or setting up the system in a very specific state beforehand so the measurement itself doesn't cause that classic uncertainty trade-off described by Heisenberg. They seem to be trying to decouple the observer from the observed, in a sense.
So if you can measure without that inherent disturbance,
then theoretically you eliminate the uncertainty that Heisenberg said was fundamental. It's a profound claim.
Okay, let's jump to the implications. What does this mean practically?
All right.
Quantum computing comes to mind immediately. Those qubits.
Right, qubits, the basic units of quantum information. They are notoriously fragile. Their biggest enemy is something called decoherence.
Which is basically losing their quantumness.
Exactly. The moment they interact too much with the outside environment, or are measured in the traditional way, they lose their delicate quantum state, the superposition or entanglement that makes them powerful. That's decoherence. It's the main reason building stable, large-scale quantum computers is so incredibly hard.
So if this new technique allows measuring, say, the state of qubits with high precision without causing them to decohere,
then you've potentially cracked one of the biggest nuts in quantum computing. You could dramatically improve the stability of qubits, develop much better error correction techniques. It would be a massive leap forward.
Meaning we could be talking about accelerating the timeline for getting practical quantum computers. Machines that could actually tackle huge problems in drug discovery, materials science, breaking encryption.
That's the potential, yes. If this research holds up under scrutiny, it could be the enabling technology needed to really push quantum computers from, sensitive lab experiments into tools that can solve real-world challenges. It suggests moving from just observing quantum weirdness to actively engineering it with much greater control.
Wow. Okay, a huge one to watch. Let's shift gears slightly, but stay with foundational ideas. Looking back, you mentioned engineering. Human history shows big leaps often come from unexpected places, right? Like the Iron Age.
Absolutely. There's interesting research highlighting that the move to iron wasn't some neat, predictable progression. It wasn't like someone just decided, let's make iron now.
It was messier.
Much messier. The evidence suggests that developing ferrous metallurgy working with iron involved a lot of trial and error. Crucially, it seems accidental mixing of different substances during heating or smelting processes led to unintentional discoveries. Maybe adding certain rocks or using certain types of charcoal produced a stronger, better metal.
Serendipity, basically. Stumbling onto breakthroughs.
Exactly. Serendipity played a massive role in getting stronger tools, better weapons. It's a great reminder that innovation isn't always a straight line. Sometimes it's about embracing the unexpected results, the happy accident.
It makes sense. Which actually leads nicely into another discovery, this one from the deep past in China. Archaeologists at the Sengsingdui site.
Yes, in Sichuan province, this site is about 4,500 years old, a really significant Bronze Age civilization. And new evidence is changing how we think about its collapse.
What was the old theory? Environmental disaster.
That was a leading theory, massive floods perhaps, or other environmental changes making the area uninhabitable. But the latest findings, well, they paint a different picture.
What did they find?
Things like city walls that appear deliberately damaged, not just eroded, and clear evidence of the destruction of important religious sites or artifacts.
Suggesting conflict.
Suggesting sustained internal conflict, maybe civil war or social breakdown. It implies the society didn't just succumb to nature, it might have torn itself apart, leading to a mass exodus of the population. It's a sobering thought.
Yeah, that human conflict has been a driving force for collapse for millennia. Shifting from ancient humans to ancient creatures. Let's talk about this fossil discovery in Germany, Mistelgau.
Ah, yes, a spectacular find. They've unearthed a fossil of Urhinosaurus mistelgauensis. It's a type of ichthyosaur, basically a large marine reptile, kind of dolphin-shaped, but, a reptile.
And this one lived when?
Early Jurassic period, roughly 183 to 175 million years ago. These things were major ocean predators back then.
Okay, so what makes this particular ichthyosaur fossil so special?
Its snout. It's absolutely unique. It has this incredible swordfish-like feature, but here's the twist. The upper jaw is massively elongated, more than twice the length of the lower jaw.
Twice the length? That's bizarre. Why?
The hypothesis is that it used this incredibly long upper snout as a weapon, not for grabbing maybe, but for slashing or stunning prey like fast-moving fish or squid in open water. It suggests a highly specialized hunting strategy, different from other ichthyosaurs.
So it's like a biological sword.
Pretty much. It shows the amazing diversity and adaptation that was happening in those ancient oceans. Germany, particularly that region, is becoming a real hotspot for uncovering these unique early Jurassic marine fossils.
Incredible. Okay, let's zoom out from Earth's oceans to deep space. The Hubble Space Telescope has given us another amazing image, this time of a galaxy called NGC 2775.
Yes, and astronomers are having trouble classifying it neatly. They're calling it a hybrid galaxy.
Hybrid, meaning
It doesn't fit cleanly into the standard boxes we use for galaxies, spiral, elliptical, or lenticular. NGC 2775 seems to show features of all three mixed together.
So it's a bit of a mess, structurally.
In a beautiful cosmic way, yes. It has a bright central bulge, kind of like an elliptical or lenticular galaxy, but also these faint, feathery, almost chaotic spiral arms. This messy structure strongly suggests a really violent and complicated past.
Like collisions.
Very likely. Probably multiple mergers with smaller galaxies over billions of years. These collisions would have stripped gas and stars, scrambled the original structure, and left behind this sort of blended hybrid appearance. It's a snapshot of galactic evolution in action.
A reminder that the universe isn't always neat and tidy. Speaking of things moving through space, there's an update on that interstellar comet 3IA LAS.
That's right. This is an object confirmed to have come from outside our solar system, an interstellar visitor. And recently, as it was cruising past Mars,
At incredible speed, right?
yeah, something like 137,000 miles per hour, as it was doing that, it got hit by a CME, a coronal mass ejection, basically, a huge explosion of plasma from the sun.
Wow. What happens when an interstellar comet gets zapped by the sun like that?
Well, that's what's interesting for scientists. CMEs hit objects in our solar system all the time, but observing one interact with a visitor from another star system moving that fast, it gives unique data. It helps them understand the composition of these alien comets, what they're made of, how durable they are compared to our own comets. It's a rare opportunity to study material formed around another star.
Okay, bringing it closer to home now, back into Earth orbit. Space debris is a growing problem, and nations are actively working on defenses. China recently did something significant on their space station.
They did, on the Tiangong space station. The crew from the Shenzhou 20 mission performed a spacewalk, an EVA extravehicular activity.
How long were they out there?
About 6 hours. And the specific goal of this quite lengthy spacewalk was to install additional debris shielding onto the station's exterior.
Extra armor, essentially, against space junk.
Exactly. This isn't just routine maintenance, it's a deliberate defensive upgrade. It really highlights the increasing concern globally about the risk from orbital debris. Even tiny flecks of paint traveling at orbital speeds can cause significant damage.
And the worry is the Kessler syndrome, right? Where collisions create more debris, leading to more collisions.
That's the nightmare scenario, yes. Where low Earth orbit becomes so cluttered with debris that it becomes essentially unusable, triggering a cascade of collisions. Installing more shielding is a direct response to that growing threat, showing China's commitment to protecting its very expensive asset in space.
It underscores that space isn't just about exploration anymore, it's about infrastructure protection.
Definitely. And looking even further out towards the moon, there's a lot of focus now on how to actually live and work there sustainably. Power is a huge issue.
Especially at the lunar poles, I imagine.
Oh,
The long shadows and extreme temperatures.
precisely. New technologies are being developed specifically for generating energy on the lunar surface, designed to cope with those brutal conditions. We're talking about systems that can survive temperatures plunging hundreds of degrees below zero during the lunar night and operate efficiently even during long periods with no direct sunlight, perhaps relying on stored energy or maybe even nuclear power sources.
And this is critical for programs like NASA's Artemis missions.
Absolutely non-negotiable. Artemis aims for a long-term human presence on the moon, particularly near the South Pole, because that's where we think significant deposits of water ice are located.
Water ice being key.
For life support, drinking water, oxygen, and also for making rocket propellant right there on the moon. But to mine and process that ice, you need continuous, reliable power, even through the 2-week-long lunar night. So developing these robust energy systems is foundational for any serious lunar settlement plans.
Okay, so from fundamental physics to lunar power grids. Let's shift our focus now. We're moving it to segment 2. Looking at the intersection of AI, the economy, and some significant market shocks happening right now.
Right, connecting the technological leaps to the economic realities.
Exactly. And we're seeing some major moves in terms of consolidation, particularly in tech and entertainment. There was a huge acquisition in the gaming sector involving Electronic Arts, EA.
Huge is right. An unprecedented $55 billion deal.
Yeah.
That figure is just staggering for a gaming company.
What does a price tag like that signal?
It signals the immense, almost unbelievable value being placed on established, reliable intellectual property. Think about EA's big hitters. EA FC, what used to be FIFA, The Sims, Madden NFL, their other sports franchises. These games generate massive, consistent revenue streams, often through annual releases, subscription models, and in-game purchases, microtransactions.
So the $55 billion is buying predictable income.
Essentially, yes. Large corporations are clearly willing to pay enormous premiums for these kinds of stable, recurring digital revenue sources. It's a major consolidation play, betting on the long-term profitability of these mega franchises.
But that drive for efficiency and profit, fueled by tech, often has a direct human cost. We're seeing that with Lufthansa, the German airline.
Yes, Lufthansa announced a pretty significant strategic plan looking out towards 2030. They intend to eliminate 4,000 administrative jobs.
4,000. And they're being quite explicit about why, aren't they?
Very explicit. They're directly linking these job cuts to their increased use of artificial intelligence and digitalization efforts. They're aiming to streamline their back office operations, boost profitability by automating tasks.
What kinds of tasks were we talking about?
Likely repetitive, rule-based, white-collar work. Things like processing invoices, data entry, managing bookings, perhaps even more sophisticated customer service routing handled by AI chatbots or algorithms. It's a clear, and for those affected, quite harsh example of how technological efficiency gains are translating directly into workforce reductions in some sectors.
It shows how quickly these technologies are moving from theoretical possibilities to impacting actual jobs.
And it forces leaders, even established ones, to be incredibly agile. Look at Marissa Mayer, the former CEO of Yahoo. She just made a big pivot.
What happened there? She had a startup, Sunshine.
That's right. Sunshine was a consumer software startup she'd been running for about 7 years. She just announced she's closing it down. But importantly, she's not just walking away. She's consolidating its assets, the tech, maybe some of the team, into her new venture, which is called Dazzle.
And Dazzle is focused on
AI, artificial intelligence. This move, closing a 7-year effort and immediately shifting focus and resources to AI, it really tells you something about the current tech landscape.
Yeah, it suggests that if your software play, especially in the consumer space, doesn't have a strong, compelling AI angle right now.
The market, particularly venture capital, might just not be interested. The momentum and investment are overwhelmingly flowing towards AI applications. Mayer's pivot shows that even experienced tech leaders recognize they need to adapt very quickly to stay relevant.
But AI isn't just about cutting jobs or making investors money. There are potentially positive social applications emerging too, like this startup, Complex Chaos.
Now, this is a really interesting counterpoint. Complex Chaos is taking a very different approach. They're using AI, specifically advanced large language models, LLMs, combined with insights from behavioral psychology.
To do what exactly?
To tackle polarization. Their goal is to help groups of people who are darkly divided, politically, socially, whatever, to actually find common ground.
How does the AI do that? Does it just listen in?
Essentially, yes. The AI analyzes transcripts or recordings of discussions between these polarized groups. It uses its language processing power to look past the heated rhetoric, the emotional language, and identify underlying points of agreement or shared values that the participants themselves might not even recognize.
So it's looking for the signal in the noise.
Exactly. It tries to find that structural common ground and then, based on behavioral psychology principles, suggest ways to frame those points to help build consensus or facilitate compromise. It's like using AI as a hyper-rational, unbiased mediator.
Instead of AI taking jobs, AI trying to repair societal divisions. That's quite a different vision.
It is. It moves AI from just being an efficiency tool to potentially being a tool for enhancing social cohesion, for improving dialogue. A very ambitious goal, of course, but fascinating nonetheless.
Definitely one to watch. Okay, let's broaden the view now to wider market forces. We're seeing volatility driven by basic commodities, like oil.
Yeah, oil prices dipped recently by nearly 1%. There were a couple of key factors driving that downward pressure.
Supply-side factors.
Mostly, yes. First, there was the unexpected resumption of crude oil exports from Kurdistan. That puts more barrels onto the global market than anticipated. Second, there's growing expectation that OPEC plus, that's the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, plus allies like Russia, will decide to increase their production quotas again come November.
Why would they do that? To keep prices from going too high?
That's generally the balancing act. They want prices high enough for their own revenues, but not so high that they stifle global economic growth and destroy demand for their product. So easing production slightly can help stabilize the market.
Makes sense. Now let's turn to U.S. trade policy. President Trump has announced some new tariffs aimed at China.
Yes, continuing that assertive stance, the new tariffs target specific types of furniture imported from China. We're looking at a hefty 50% tariff on kitchen cabinets and a 30% tariff on upholstered furniture.
And the stated goal is?
Explicitly to try and revive U.S. manufacturing in those sectors, to bring jobs back to the U.S., particularly focusing on industries that might be based in politically important states. It's a protectionist measure, plain and simple.
But how effective have previous tariffs been in this area?
Well, that's where it gets complicated. The data actually shows that despite earlier rounds of tariffs on furniture, U.S. imports of those goods from China still increased by about 7% year on year.
Really? Why would that be?
It points to the powerful underlying economics. The cost difference between manufacturing in the U.S. versus China for these kinds of goods can be substantial. Plus, China's manufacturing base offers enormous scale and variety that can be hard for U.S. producers to match quickly. So even with tariffs, it seems many importers are still finding it economical to source from China, or perhaps they haven't found viable alternatives yet. Reshoring manufacturing is a slow, difficult process.
Okay, so that's U.S.-China. Meanwhile, there's a big deadline looming for a major U.S.-Africa trade deal.
Yes, this is really significant. The African Growth and Opportunity Act, commonly known as AGOA, it's been a cornerstone of U.S.-Africa trade relations for decades.
What does AGOA do?
It provides duty-free access to the U.S. market for thousands of products exported from eligible sub-Saharan African countries. Basically, it lets them sell their goods in the U.S. without facing the high standard tariffs that other countries might pay.
And the deadline.
It's set to expire on September 30, 2025. And there's currently a lot of uncertainty about whether it will be renewed or in what form.
What happens if it just expires?
The implications could be really severe for many African economies. Sectors that have built up industries relying on that duty-free access would suddenly face potentially crippling tariffs. Think about South Africa's citrus fruit exports or the vital textile and apparel industries in countries like Lesotho or Madagascar. They could lose their price competitiveness overnight,
Leading to
significant job losses. We could be talking hundreds of thousands of jobs across the continent that are directly or indirectly linked to AGOA exports.
So, while some argue this expiration might push African nations towards more self-reliance, maybe boosting trade within Africa through initiatives like the AfCFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area, or strengthening ties with China or the EU,
The short-term economic shock for countries heavily dependent on AGOA could be really substantial. It's forcing a major rethink of trade strategies across Africa.
Okay, one more market point before we move on. A warning sign about property markets.
Yes, the investment bank UBS has put out a specific alert. They're warning about elevated real estate bubble risk in 3 major global cities: Los Angeles in the U.S., Dubai in the UAE, and Amsterdam in the Netherlands.
What's driving the bubble risk there? The usual suspects.
Pretty much. UBS points to a combination of factors: very rapid price increases that seem disconnected from local income growth, strong investor demand, both domestic and international, possibly fueled by relatively low interest rates in the recent past, and in some cases, ongoing shortages of housing supply.
So prices are getting detached from the fundamentals.
That's the concern UBS is flagging. They're essentially saying these markets look overheated, and buyers and investors should exercise serious caution because the risk of a price correction is significantly higher than in other major cities.
Okay, noted. Now, let's turn to a very immediate risk facing the U.S. government itself: the potential for a partial shutdown.
Yeah, the deadline is looming midnight Wednesday. If Congress can't agree on a spending bill to keep the government funded, parts of it will have to close down.
And the sticking point isn't just about the total amount of money, is it?
No, it's become deeply entangled with policy disputes, particularly around healthcare and legislative tactics.
What's the core disagreement?
Democrats are really pushing to include specific provisions in the spending bill that would expand healthcare access and, critically, reverse some proposed cuts to Medicaid that were part of earlier Republican drafts. They see this must-pass spending bill as their best chance, their key leverage point, to protect these social safety net programs.
And the Republican position.
They rejected a proposal for a short-term funding bill, a continuing resolution or CR that would have just kept the government open until late November. They're insisting that these complex, major healthcare policy changes need to be debated separately, not tacked onto a straightforward budget bill under threat of a shutdown.
So it's a classic game of legislative chicken. Ideological demands versus the basic functioning of government.
Pretty much. And it means hundreds of thousands of federal workers could be furloughed, national parks might close, various government services could be disrupted if they don't find a resolution by midnight Wednesday.
How are the markets reacting to this uncertainty? It seems like mixed signals. Gold prices, for instance.
Gold is soaring. It surged past $3,800 an ounce, which is a new record high.
Wow. Why the surge?
This is classic safe haven behavior. When investors get nervous about political instability, like a potential government shutdown, or worry about the value of the U.S. dollar weakening due to fiscal uncertainty, they often flee to assets perceived as safer, more stable stores of value. And gold is the traditional go-to.
So the gold market is clearly spooked by the shutdown risk.
Definitely. But then you look at the stock market.
And it's more sanguine.
It's shown mixed results, not a full-on panic, and you have some prominent market analysts, like Michael Hunstad from Northern Trust, who is quoted saying they view the shutdown risk itself as pretty benign, at least in terms of long-term economic impact.
Benign. How can they say that when gold is hitting record highs?
Their argument is based on history. They point out that previous U.S. government shutdowns, while disruptive in the short term, haven't typically caused lasting damage to the overall economy or corporate profits. So stock market analysts tend to look at the historical data and figure the market will ride it out.
So it's a real split in perspective.
Yeah.
Gold investors are reacting to the immediate political risk and uncertainty, while some stock analysts are focused on the longer-term economic fundamentals, assuming any shutdown will be temporary.
Exactly. It shows different ways of assessing and pricing risk in the financial world.
Okay, let's shift from fiscal cliffs to geopolitical flashpoints. Segment 3, digging into global conflicts and high-stakes diplomacy.
Right, and the dynamics in the Russia-Ukraine conflict continue to evolve, including the rhetoric from Washington.
Yeah, there was a noticeable statement from Vice President J.D. Vance recently, aligning with President Trump's views.
What did he say specifically?
He publicly called Russia a paper tiger. That's a pretty blunt term. And he went on to urge Russia to, quote, wake up to the reality of its military failures and start negotiating seriously for peace.
Paper tiger. That's strong language. Does it reflect a genuine intelligence assessment that Russia's capabilities are severely degraded, or is it more of a rhetorical push to pressure Moscow?
It's hard to say definitively from the outside. It could signal a belief within the administration that Russia's offensive capacity is much more limited now, maybe due to heavy losses in personnel and equipment, or sanctions biting harder than expected, or it could be aimed at bolstering Ukrainian morale and undermining Russian confidence.
Interesting. But even as that rhetoric suggests weakness, the U.S. is apparently considering actions that could escalate the conflict's firepower.
That's the seeming contradiction. Reports indicate Washington is contemplating selling long-range Tomahawk cruise missiles to some NATO allies.
With the understanding that those allies would then transfer them to Ukraine.
That appears to be the idea. Tomahawks represent a significant step up in capability, much longer range, higher precision than many systems Ukraine currently operates.
How has Russia responded to this possibility? Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov did his usual downplaying, saying no single weapon system will fundamentally change the war's outcome. However, he added a significant warning.
Which was?
He stated that operating weapons as complex as Tomahawks would almost certainly require direct involvement from U.S. personnel for targeting, maintenance, maybe even operational support, and he explicitly labeled that kind of direct involvement as a serious escalation by the United States.
So Russia's drawing a line there, suggesting that providing the weapon is one thing, but providing the operational expertise crosses into direct conflict.
That seems to be the message they're sending. It raises the stakes considerably.
And the conflict's reach extends far beyond the front lines.
Yeah.
We're seeing the impact even in places like Iraq with mercenary recruitment.
Yes, there was a significant legal case in Najaf, Iraq. A man named Rizan Fa Kamel was sentenced to life in prison.
For what crime?
For trafficking individuals, essentially recruiting mercenaries to go fight for Russia in Ukraine. This case really shines a light on the global, often shadowy networks that supply fighters for conflicts. Reports suggest thousands of Iraqis and nationals from other countries, too, have been lured, often by promises of high pay, to join the fighting on Russia's side.
It highlights Russia's need to find manpower wherever it can, possibly due to its own heavy casualties.
It certainly suggests a reliance on external sources to sustain its forces.
And amidst all these strategic moves and global networks, we have to remember the profound human cost. There was a particularly harrowing account from the former mayor of Kherson, Ukraine, Mykolayenko.
Yes, his story is deeply sobering. He was captured by Russian forces way back in March 2022, near the start of the full-scale invasion, and he endured over 3 years in Russian captivity. He spoke about experiencing torture.
3 years. What else did he share about that experience?
He spoke about the resilience of the Ukrainian people, their spirit. But he also alluded to something quite sensitive, a sense of betrayal or perhaps treachery during the initial days of the occupation of Kherson. He suggested that maybe local collaboration or perhaps failures in the initial defense allowed the city to fall so quickly.
That adds another layer of tragedy to it.
It does. His personal narrative surviving that kind of prolonged systematic abuse, it's a powerful, visceral reminder of the deep human trauma being inflicted by this war, far beyond the battlefield statistics.
Absolutely. Let's shift focus now to the Middle East, where diplomatic efforts are intense, particularly regarding the Gaza conflict. President Trump met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yes, a very high-stakes meeting at the White House. They were discussing President Trump's proposed 21-point plan aimed at ending the war in Gaza.
A 21-point plan? That sounds comprehensive. What are the key elements we know about?
The core seems to be a phased approach. It reportedly involves a mutual release of hostages. The initial phase might see 20 living Israeli hostages freed in exchange for hundreds of Palestinian prisoners currently held by Israel.
Okay, a prisoner exchange. What else?
Significant increases in humanitarian aid flowing into Gaza, and then perhaps the most contentious point, the potential for safe passage out of Gaza for key Hamas leaders, but only if they agree to specific terms, likely including disarmament.
Safe passage for Hamas leaders. That sounds like something Netanyahu would strongly oppose.
Exactly. Reports indicate Netanyahu is sticking firmly to his position. The war ends only when Hamas's military capabilities and its ability to govern Gaza are completely dismantled. So the huge question hanging over this 21-point plan is whether these two fundamentally opposed endgames, a negotiated exit for some Hamas figures versus the total elimination of Hamas, can possibly be bridged.
It seems like a massive diplomatic challenge.
Immense. And adding to the regional pressure cooker, Iran is facing a renewed economic onslaught.
How so? More sanctions.
Yes, but these are particularly significant. The United Nations sanctions that were lifted under the 2015 nuclear deal, the JCPOA, are being reimposed. This is happening via the snapback mechanism within the deal itself.
Triggered by whom?
The UK, France, and Germany formally triggered it, citing Iran's ongoing violations of the nuclear deal's restrictions. The snapback is designed to automatically reinstate all the previous UN sanctions.
Okay, what do those sanctions target?
Critical sectors of the Iranian economy. They severely restrict Iran's ability to trade conventional weapons. They heavily target its oil exports, which are the absolute lifeblood of the regime's finances, and they cut off Iranian banks from the international financial system.
The economic impact could be
Devastating. Analysts are projecting this could lead to severe hyperinflation inside Iran, deepen the existing economic crisis, and potentially push the country towards near economic collapse. It's a major escalation of economic pressure.
And amidst this economic pressure and the Gaza diplomacy, the shadow war between Iran and Israel continues. Iran recently executed someone accused of spying for Israel.
Yes, they announced the execution of a man named Baman Chubialzal. Iranian authorities described him as one of the most significant spies ever caught working for Israel's intelligence agency, Mossad.
What does an execution like that signal?
It underscores the intensity and lethality of the ongoing, undeclared intelligence war between Iran and Israel. This conflict plays out through espionage, cyber attacks, sabotage, targeted assassinations. Even without large-scale conventional fighting, the tensions are extremely high and constantly simmering, often boiling over in incidents like this execution.
Okay, let's move to Europe now. Some significant political developments there, starting with Moldova.
Right. Moldova, a country right on the front line, bordering Ukraine, they just had a really important parliamentary election.
And the results were decisive.
Very much so. The pro-European Union Party, called PAS, Party of Action and Solidarity, won a clear majority, securing over 50% of the vote. This is being widely interpreted as a major win for Moldova's pro-Western orientation.
And this happened despite concerns about Russian interference.
Exactly. There were widespread allegations both before and during the campaign of significant Russian efforts to interfere, spread disinformation, and destabilize the pro-EU government. Moldova's president, Maia Sandu, explicitly framed the victory as proof that Russia failed in its attempts to sway the Moldovan people away from a European path.
So a clear signal from the electorate there. Meanwhile, in the UK, the government is implementing stricter rules for immigrants seeking long-term residency.
Yes, the Home Secretary announced new requirements for migrants applying for settled status, which is basically permanent residency in the UK.
What are the new hurdles?
Several key things. Applicants will need to demonstrate a higher level of English language proficiency than before. They must also prove they have made contributions to national insurance, which is the UK's social security and health system fund. And perhaps most significantly, there's a stipulation that they must not have claimed welfare benefits for a certain period.
So the focus is on self-sufficiency and economic contribution.
That's the clear message. It aligns with the UK's broader post-Brexit immigration strategy, which aims to prioritize skilled workers and ensure that migrants integrate economically relatively quickly. Critics, however, argue these stricter requirements could disadvantage refugees or those who genuinely need some initial support to get established.
Okay, let's transition to our next segment. Segment 4 is focused on the planet itself, resilience, climate challenges, and also security issues.
Dealing with both immediate disasters and longer-term policy fights.
Exactly. And we have to start with some devastating extreme weather events. Typhoon Bualoi.
Yes, Bualoi hit Southeast Asia hard. It made landfall in Vietnam, specifically in An province, earlier than initially expected and with significant force.
What was the impact?
Tragically, at least 8 deaths have been confirmed in Vietnam, with another 17 people reported missing. The typhoon brought winds topping 130 kilometers per hour, around 80 miles per hour, and torrential rain, causing widespread flooding and damage. Hundreds of thousands of people had to be evacuated from vulnerable coastal areas.
And this was after it had already hit the Philippines, right?
Correct. Bualoi had already caused 11 deaths in the Philippines before reaching Vietnam. It really underscores the danger these powerful early-season typhoons pose across the entire region.
And the Atlantic hurricane season is also active.
It is. We saw Tropical Storm Imelda form, tracking alongside the already existing Hurricane Humberto. Imelda is projected to bring significant rainfall and potential flash flooding to the southeastern U.S., with central Florida being an area of particular concern.
And Humberto, even as it weakens, is still having an impact.
Yes, even the remnants of what was Hurricane Humberto are still potent enough. That system is tracking northeastwards across the Atlantic and is actually expected to bring strong winds and heavy rain to parts of the United Kingdom in the coming days.
It really shows how interconnected these large weather systems are globally.
Absolutely. And shifting from weather to ecology, there's a major crisis unfolding in Namibia. A huge wildfire in Etosha National Park.
Etosha is one of Africa's most important wildlife reserves, isn't it?
It truly is. Massive, iconic, and this fire is catastrophic. The Namibian government has deployed over 500 soldiers, plus helicopters equipped for water bombing, to try and contain it.
How much area has burned?
The latest estimates are staggering. Approximately 1.9 million acres. That's roughly a third of the entire park's area.
A third. The impact on wildlife must be immense.
Devastating. Etosha is home to a huge diversity of animals, including critically endangered species like the black rhinoceros. A fire of this scale destroys habitat, kills animals directly, and disrupts migration patterns. It's an ecological disaster fueled by strong winds, very dry conditions.
Do you know how it started?
There are reports suggesting it might be linked to nearby charcoal production activities. The concern is that fires used in that process may have escaped and spread uncontrollably into the park. If true, it's a stark example of how human economic activity, even small scale, can trigger massive environmental consequences in vulnerable ecosystems.
A tragic situation. Now, let's look at the policy battles surrounding climate change, particularly in the U.S. There's that controversial directive from the Trump administration's Department of Energy, DOE.
Yes, this policy has drawn a lot of criticism. It reportedly forbids DOE staff scientists, policy analysts from using specific terms like climate change, green, or even emission reduction goals in official documents and communications.
They're literally banning words.
That's the report. It's seen not just as a semantic issue, but as a deliberate attempt to downplay the significance of climate change within the federal government, to stifle scientific discussion related to it, and perhaps to align official communications more closely with the administration's focus on fossil fuel production.
That seems counterproductive if you want to address the issue.
Critics would certainly argue it hinders effective policymaking and ignores scientific consensus. It creates a real disconnect between the scientific reality and the official government discourse.
But while that's happening at the federal level, some state officials are pushing hard in the opposite direction, like Arizona's Attorney General.
Yes, Chris Mays in Arizona is taking a very aggressive stance. She's filed numerous lawsuits. 25 is the number reported, targeting various environmental and energy issues. This includes fighting attempts by major utility companies in Arizona to raise electricity rates by as much as 14%.
Why the fight over electricity rates?
In Arizona, it's directly linked to climate and public health. Extreme heat is a major threat, making reliable and affordable air conditioning literally a matter of life and death. Mays is arguing against rate hikes and also fighting efforts to repeal the state's renewable energy standards, emphasizing the need for grid stability in the face of climate change.
And she's also tackling water scarcity.
Yes, that's another huge piece of the puzzle in Arizona. She's highlighted the fact that a vast majority of the state, maybe 80%, lacks regulation on groundwater pumping. This allows large agricultural businesses and other major water users to deplete aquifers unsustainably, which is a critical issue in a drought-prone desert state. She's really connecting the dots between energy policy, climate resilience, and fundamental resource management like water.
So a real battleground state on these issues. Let's shift slightly now to something where history, ecology, and hazards intersect. Underwater off the coast of Germany.
Yeah, this is a really strange and concerning situation in the North Sea and Baltic Sea. After World War II, millions of tons of unwanted munitions, bombs, shells, mines, even chemical weapons were simply dumped overboard.
Just dumped in the sea.
Yes, it was seen as the easiest way to dispose of them. And over the decades, something unexpected happened. These massive dumps of metal objects started acting like artificial reefs.
Artificial reefs, so marine life moved in.
Exactly. They've become hotspots for marine biodiversity. Fish, corals, crustaceans. They've colonized these munition piles, creating surprisingly vibrant underwater ecosystems.
That's incredible. A positive outcome from war debris.
Well, here's the catch. It's a double-edged sword. While they provide habitat, these munitions are now corroding after decades underwater. They're starting to leak toxic substances, heavy metals like mercury and lead, explosives compounds like TNT, and potentially even chemical warfare agents directly into the marine environment.
So the reef is poisoning itself and the surrounding water.
That's the serious environmental hazard. It's a ticking time bomb, ecologically speaking. Cleaning it up is going to be an incredibly complex and expensive task, likely costing billions of euros, but it's becoming increasingly urgent as the corrosion accelerates.
Wow, a legacy of conflict, creating both life and poison. Speaking of underwater history, there's work being done on the HMHS Britannic wreck.
Yes, the Britannic, the lesser-known but equally tragic sister ship of the Titanic. It sank in the Aegean Sea off Greece in 1916 during World War I while serving as a hospital ship.
And artifacts are being recovered.
That's right. There's an ongoing effort to carefully recover artifacts from the wreck site. The goal is preservation and eventual display.
Where will they be displayed?
Plans are for them to be housed in a new underwater archaeology museum being established in Greece. It's about preserving the memory of the ship, the lives lost, and providing a tangible connection to this significant maritime disaster from over a century ago.
Okay, let's move into our final segment, segment 5. This focuses more on societal divisions, domestic politics, and challenges within communities.
Covering shifts in politics, public safety, and even cultural debates.
And starting in the U.S., a major political development in New York City.
Yes, a significant shakeup. Mayor Eric Adams has officially announced he is ending his campaign for re-election.
Why the withdrawal?
His approval ratings had fallen quite dramatically. This was largely due to ongoing scrutiny surrounding corruption allegations and federal investigations into his campaign financing and potentially other matters. The pressure clearly became too much.
And what does his withdrawal mean for the race?
It fundamentally changes the dynamic. It effectively clears the path for his main challenger from the left, Zoran Mamdani, who identifies as a progressive socialist. Mamdani had already been gaining momentum, and Adams stepping aside makes him the likely frontrunner now. It really highlights the volatile political currents in major U.S. cities.
A very different kind of challenge now. Sadly, we also need to address a tragic incident of violence. The mass shooting at a church in Michigan.
Yes, a deeply shocking event at a Mormon church. The details are harrowing.
What happened?
The assailant, identified as Thomas Jacob Sanford, who was reportedly a 40-year-old Iraq War veteran, drove his truck directly into the church building. He then got out and opened fire, killing multiple people inside.
Just horrific. Was there any indication of motive?
Investigations are ongoing, of course, but media reports and police information subsequently noted that Sanford had made public statements expressing support for President Donald Trump. Authorities often include such details when trying to understand the context or potential ideological factors contributing to such violent acts, though motive is often complex.
A terrible tragedy. And shifting to the West Coast, there's escalating tension between the state of Oregon and the federal government.
Yes, over the deployment of federal forces in Portland, the state of Oregon has actually filed a formal legal challenge against President Trump's directive to send U.S. military forces into the city.
Why are they challenging it? Portland has seen ongoing protests.
Right. Protests related to civil liberties, racial injustice, and policing have been happening for a long time. But Oregon officials, including the governor, argue that deploying active-duty military forces for domestic law enforcement violates states' rights. They're concerned about the militarization of the response to protests and potential infringements on citizens' rights.
Are they citing specific laws?
The challenge likely invokes principles related to the Posse Comitatus Act, which generally restricts the use of the U.S. military for domestic policing, although there are exceptions. It's a fundamental clash over federal versus state authority in managing civil unrest.
How has the Trump administration responded to the legal challenge?
Their response has been to double down, essentially. They've called up about 200 National Guard troops in addition to any potential military deployment, signaling their determination to maintain order as they define it, despite the state's objections. It's a significant constitutional standoff.
Okay, let's move from these flashpoints to health and lifestyle news. There was a fascinating, maybe slightly terrifying piece of research about junk food and memory.
Yeah, this one definitely caught my eye. It's quite alarming how quickly the effects can manifest. The study found that eating high-fat, highly processed, hyper-palatable junk foods.
This stuff that tastes too good.
Exactly. Eating that kind of food for just 4 days was enough to significantly scramble memory function in study participants.
4 days. How? What does it do to the brain?
It appears to cause hyperactivity in the neurons within the hippocampus. The hippocampus is a brain region absolutely critical for learning and memory formation, especially spatial memory and short-term recall.
And junk food makes these neurons hyper.
That's the finding. The researchers think it might be linked to the massive spikes in blood glucose that these foods cause, which can overwhelm the brain's normal regulatory systems and essentially excite the hippocampal neurons abnormally, disrupting their function.
That's worrying. Is the damage permanent?
Here's the hopeful part. The study also suggested the effects might be reversible, at least in the short term. They found that interventions like immediate dietary changes or even intermittent fasting could help restore normal glucose levels relatively quickly and calm down that neuronal hyperactivity.
So ditching the junk food quickly might undo the short-term memory scramble.
That seems to be the implication. But it's a stark warning about how profoundly and rapidly our diet can impact core cognitive functions like memory.
Definitely food for thought. Speaking of food, there were also some major safety recalls people should know about.
Yes, a couple of significant ones. First, a massive recall, around 58 million pounds of corn dogs and sausage on a stick type products.
58 million pounds. Why?
The concern is potential contamination with extraneous material, specifically pieces of wood. That poses a serious choking hazard, especially for children.
Okay, good to know. What was the other one?
The grocery chain Albertsons issued a recall for several ready-to-eat deli items, including a bow tie pasta salad. This one was due to potential contamination with Listeria monocotoda genes.
Listeria is serious, right?
Very serious. It's a bacterium that can cause severe illness, particularly dangerous for pregnant women, newborns, the elderly, and anyone with a weakened immune system. So consumers need to be really careful about checking recall notices.
Absolutely. And on a different health note, sometimes even icons have to prioritize their well-being. Dolly Parton made an announcement.
Yes, Dolly Parton announced she's postponing her planned Las Vegas residency show by 9 months.
Why the delay?
The statement cited unspecified health challenges. She emphasized that while disappointed, her health had to come first. It's a reminder that even for someone with her incredible energy and work ethic, health issues can arise and require taking a necessary step back from demanding professional commitments.
A good reminder for everyone, really.
Yeah.
Okay, let's touch on some cultural and societal friction points now. The ongoing public disagreement between author J.K. Rowling and actress Emma Watson.
Yes, this continues to make headlines. It revolves around their deeply differing views on transgender rights and related issues.
What was the latest development?
Rowling publicly criticized Watson again, this time reportedly labeling her as ignorant and suggesting she lacks real-world understanding of the complexities surrounding gender identity legislation and its impact, particularly regarding women's single-sex spaces.
So the conflict is still very active.
Very much so. It highlights the deep, often painful fractures within contemporary feminism and broader social discourse about how to balance inclusivity for trans individuals with existing frameworks for women's rights and safety. It's a complex and highly sensitive debate.
Indeed. And the intersection of sports and politics was on full display recently, too, particularly with the India versus Pakistan cricket match.
Oh, yes, the Asia Cup final, always a high-stakes, emotionally charged event given the history between the two nations. India won the match.
But the sportsmanship wasn't exactly smooth afterwards.
Not entirely. There were reports and images showing the Indian players pointedly refusing to accept the winner's trophy from Mohsin Naqvi. He's the chairman of the Asian Cricket Council, ACC, but he's also a prominent Pakistani government minister.
So, a political statement on the podium.
It appeared that way. And it didn't stop there. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi posted a celebratory message on social media that didn't just praise the team. He explicitly invoked a recent military conflict, referencing Operation Sindoor, directly linking the cricket victory to national security and military tensions.
Wow. So literally using a sports win to amplify geopolitical messaging.
Absolutely. It's a powerful example of how major sporting contests between rival nations are often treated as extensions of their political and military conflicts, with victories leveraged for nationalistic sentiment.
A complex mix of sport and statecraft. Finally, let's look at an issue of accountability within policing, this time in the UK. Pressure on the Metropolitan Police regarding Freemasons.
Yes, there's renewed pressure on London's Metropolitan Police Service, the Met, to implement a policy requiring officers to disclose whether they are members of the Freemasons.
Why the focus on Freemasons?
It stems largely from long-standing criticisms about how the Met handled certain historical cases, most notably the unsolved 1987 murder of a private investigator named Daniel Morgan. Critics have alleged for years that potential Masonic connections among officers involved might have compromised the investigation or led to corruption.
So the concern is about secrecy and potential conflicts of interest.
Exactly. The argument is that membership in a secret society like the Freemasons could create loyalties that conflict with an officer's duty, potentially hindering investigations involving fellow members or undermining public trust in the police force's impartiality. The push for disclosure is framed as a necessary step towards greater transparency and accountability.
Another complex issue of trust and transparency. Okay, that brings us to the end of our source deep dive.
We certainly covered a lot of ground today.
We really did. From quantum physics, potentially breaking its own rules with that Heisenberg challenge, all the way through the geopolitical chess games, the tomahawk debates for Ukraine, the incredibly delicate Gaza peace plan.
And the economic shifts, right? That huge EA acquisition showing the power of digital IP, Lufthansa's AI-driven job cuts, the looming AGOA deadline for Africa, the shutdown fears in the U.S. driving gold prices.
Not to mention the immediate climate crises, like Typhoon Bualoi and the devastating fire in Etosha, contrasted with policy battles like the DOE word ban and Arizona's fight over energy and water.
It's a world grappling with immense challenges on multiple fronts simultaneously.
It really is. But let's try and connect a couple of threads for a final provocative thought, something for you, the listener, to consider. We talked about that startup, complex chaos.
Right, using sophisticated AI, large language models, behavioral psychology, all trying to help us humans find common ground, build consensus in our increasingly polarized world.
So we're building these incredibly complex tools to help us overcome our own biases and disagreements. But then we also talked about that health research.
The junk food study. Just 4 days of eating that stuff can actively disrupt the hippocampus, the part of the brain crucial for memory, learning, and potentially higher-level critical thinking.
So here's the thought. If we are increasingly needing to rely on artificial intelligence to help us solve problems of polarization and find consensus problems that arguably require clear, critical human thought, what does it mean if our basic lifestyle choices, like diet, are actively working against our own cognitive capacity?
Are we building AI to solve problems that we are simultaneously making ourselves less capable of solving through our own actions? If our ability to think clearly and remember effectively is being degraded by our food environment,
How effectively can we even engage with the complex solutions AI might propose, or critically evaluate them? Does widespread consumption of ultra-processed food become, in a strange way, a kind of societal cognitive impairment, maybe even a national security risk if it hinders our collective ability to make sound decisions?
that's a deeply unsettling question. Are we inadvertently undermining the very mental faculties we need to navigate the complex future we're building?
Something to chew on, perhaps. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
We look forward to exploring the next stack of sources with you soon.
You're enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.